So when they then went on to Brazil, the Yoruba Jews, they obviously continued to follow what what they were taught. So on this part, we're gonna have a look at exactly the practices and what are these things that they were doing that they were taught. Thank you to everyone who's been liking the video. It really helps. I've seen on my YouTube that it's actually helped to push the algorithms to get my videos out there. And I do believe a lot more people do need to see these videos because it's very informative and people really do need to, learn from these videos so that it can remind us of, who we are and our ancestors and just what God wants from us as well and where we went wrong as well. That's the most important thing so that we can so that in order for us to know how to move forward. Whether known as Santeria in Cuba, Candomblé in Brazil, or more generically as the worship of Orishas, Yoruba religious practices extended across the Atlantic and practitioners can be found in ever-growing numbers from New York to Buenos Aires and in many areas in between. Now we're going to have a look at someone who practices Santeria. He owns a store and I think this one's in Cuba. So let's have a look at what he's got to say about the religion Santeria.
There were several kingdoms around Nigeria. Benin, Togo, Ghana, Senegal, and Congo. And these are the people that were brought to the islands in Brazil and Cuba. What the Spaniards didn't know, they considered all equal blacks a beast of work. They thought they were all spoke the same language and that they all understood each other without realizing that they brought 26 different races.
Oh, wow.
With over 120 languages and dialects. But what they did have in common is ways of worshiping. And the worshiping was based in nature.
Although Cuba was colonized by Spain in the 1490s and the first Yoruba arrived in the 1500s, the importation of larger numbers of slaves only began during the 18th and 19th century. Lukumi, or Lukumai, as the Yoruba were known in Cuba, continued to distinguish themselves culturally as a separate African group among many through the formation of fraternal associations organized around lines of ethnicity and religiously through the practice of Santeria. The dramatic transference of the Yoruba to Cuba disrupted their religious context. The focus of Catholicism on the veneration of the saints facilitated the emergence of Orishas in Cuba. The annual calendar celebrated a cycle of saint holy days, and peoples, cities, towns, neighborhoods, and even sugar mills carried the name of patron saints. Furthermore, divine images abounded in homes and churches, with shrines set up for the holiest of saints. As a result, the hundreds of Orishas known to distinctive Yoruba ethnic groups merged in the New World in Cuba, with only the most important ones surviving to be transformed into Santeria. So basically, around these times, what was going on was, as you're probably going to hear in the next video that I'm going to play, that when the Yorubas came into Brazil and Cuba, one of the main things that had to happen was they had to get baptized, as soon as they landed. And obviously we all know whatever happens in all of these countries where the Catholic Church was trying to change people's religions, one of the main things they ask you to do is, you've got to let go of, your rituals and your whatever you're practicing. So the Yorubas, when they came at that time, they had so many, you know how they were doing at that time, they had so many different gods that they prayed to. So what they then had to do is, they had to, I think it's in the thousands, the amount of gods that they used to pray to. So they had to then, minimize it to only keeping some of their gods who they were able to fit into with who they had to then merge into with Catholicism. You're going to see on the next video that I'm going to play, this man's going to explain it to you.
Now, this religion arrives through Christopher Columbus, right? They were mostly baptized as Catholics. No two ways about it.
So they didn't have a choice.
No choice. So they begin to hide what they worship behind the Catholic saints. And from there they were Santeria, who means in Spanish worship of saints.
Okay.
But in the African side, the word saint don't exist. Exists the word Orisha.
Orisha.
And Ori is this part inside called your own consciousness.
Okay.
And Sha means protector or guide of your consciousness.
Okay.
Like a guardian angel,
Yeah.
to say. They began to practice the religion hidden from the Spaniards. The slaves were divided in groups. The field workers and the indoor slaves.
Okay.
The indoor slaves began to learn Spanish or Portuguese or French, whichever the masters. And occasionally happened that somebody in the family of the master will get sick. But at the time, doctors were very scarce.
I can imagine.
And it would take many days for a doctor to reach some of the farms or plantations. So one of the indoor slaves offered their service that they knew one of the slaves, they could help him.
Okay.
And it did help him, heal him. And as a gratitude, the master will allow him to practice in certain days, no under the supervision of the church,
Yeah.
their own tradition.
So they'd like every 6 weeks or whatever,
You
go
can
off
practice,
and do your own thing.
do your own thing, correct. Then, as the years pass, in the 1700s, they allow him to create Catholic fraternities,
Okay.
or cabildos, they call it. And all the blacks will get together under the patron saint of the church, but practice their religion.
Okay, so like, for example, you could be Saint Martin for one,
Right,
but you would be doing your
right, or La Caridad del Cobre, or St. Francis, or whoever. But in reality, they were doing what they were doing.
Yeah, just so they didn't get shot.
Few years back, I went to Haiti, and to fraternize with voodoo priest, who is another branch of this tradition. And I went to one of the most beautiful churches in Port-au-Prince with an incredible amount of frescoes of all the orishas of voodoo. They are called loas.
Okay.
It's been destroyed with the earthquake.
It's a shame.
And I was talking to the priest in French about the loas and how come it's inside the church. And in that moment, I see 3 black men walking in, sneaking into going to a side altar with a rooster. And they do a sacrifice in there, behind the altar. And I'm looking at them, and I'm looking at the priest. And the priest is very nonchalant. And they finish, and they go out, and they put some coins in the collector box.
Yeah.
And I say to the priest, and you allow him to do that inside of the church? And he answered to me, we have to get him any way we can.
So the Catholic Church at the time when they was trying to, convert these, these Yorubas that were in Brazil or Cuba at the time, they didn't mind what they were doing behind closed doors, the Yorubas, they practice wherever they was practicing behind closed doors, as long as, they they associated themselves with the religion, with a Christian Catholic religion. Do you get it? So they didn't really care about what they were doing behind closed doors, because that's what it was. They was going to different countries and just trying to get as many members as they could. And as the guy was saying in the video, that he even witnessed, practitioners of, let's say, witchcraft entering the church and, having an altar on the side of the church. And the priest didn't even mind that. Do you get it? So that's just what was going on. So we're going to have a look at the word syncretism, because that's basically what it is. That's what was going on in them times. There was a lot of syncretism happening where, the religion Orisha, it was basically allowing people to, you can bring in whether you're a Muslim, whether you're, a Christian, Catholic, whatever, as long as, and then you can still, worship these Orisha, whatever they call them, deities, along with, your Christianity or your Islam. Do you get it? So that's basically what was going on in these times. So syncretism is the amalgamation or attempted amalgamation of different religions, cultures, or schools of thought. Basically, it's just merging different things into one together. So that's basically what was happening. The Way of the Saints is also known as La Reglada O'Shea. Let me see if I said that wrong. La Reglade O'Shea, the rule or law of Orisha, emerging from Yoruba and Catholic derived forms of religious expression. Santeria is a new world, neo-African religion forged by syncretism or a meshing based on adaptation, mutual influence, combination, and representation of the sacred. Santeria evolved from polycultural African and European belief systems by worshipping the Orishas, the pantheon of Yoruba gods behind the image of Catholic saints. Do you get it? So they merged the Catholicism and with the Yoruba tradition, they merged that together and then they came up with Santeria. So the pantheon of Yoruba gods behind the image of Catholic saints. So it's like at that time, that was the only sort of way they can get away with continuing, their practices. They'll tell the Catholic Church that we're converting to your Christianity, but behind closed doors, they were still doing what they were doing. Do you get it? So while everyone's going into the church and they're praying to whoever, was it Mary or whatever they prayed to the saints, these lot will be, doing their rituals in front of the saints. So that's just the way how they got away with continuing doing what they wanted to do. So this was a complex process that continues to the present. The Roman Catholic Church, they were just running around trying to get as many people converted as possible, but they didn't really care too much about the individuals. They just wanted to get them on board. So, as he even mentioned on the video, that there was a time when, someone was ill and, one of the practitioners was able to help them. One of the enslaved Yorubas was able to help them, and it worked. They was able to get healing from the divination, from the practices that they do. So from then on, people started to pay more attention to, the rituals and stuff like that, to the Orisha religion. So later on, the Catholic Church ended up folding, and in a way, they ended up setting up an organization in Cuba that ended up, to support these Africans, to make them still like, it helped to conserve the core of African belief systems, the dances, the ritual practices, the languages, instruments, chants, and songs. So this organization that was set up was called Cabildos de Nación, which they set up for them, just to make them feel at home a bit, in a way, at home away from home. Do you get it? So the associations first appeared in Cuba in the 16th century. Cabildo membership was typically associated with common ancestry. Thus, people with ties to the Lucumi or Lucumai, as well as to other ethnic groups such as the Arara, Karabali, Congo, Kanga, Mandinga, and Mina participated. As the population of the African descent grew, Spain established Cabildos de Nación to provide assistance and cultural activities for slaves and freed women and men. As more and more slaves arrived in Cuba, the Catholic Church attempted to stimulate religious conversion and instruction of slaves via Cabildos de Nación. For instance, prior to the mid-18th century, the church required Cabildo members to gather primarily on Sundays and holidays. However, in 1755, the Roman Catholic Church officially recognized Cabildos de Nación. The symbolism available in Catholicism provided a space for Yoruba religious beliefs to be reinterpreted and to re-emerge. Catholicism in colonial Cuba emphasized two major factors that enabled the transformation into Santeria: one God and active religious intermediaries. The Yoruba religious tradition is based on the belief in one supreme being called Olodumare, Oloran, Olofi, or Olofin. In addition, Cabildos de Nación comprised a key component in sustaining Yoruba musical and dance traditions in colonial Cuba. Recreational and spiritual activities, including gathering on festival days to drum, dance, and sing. See, this is how they always catch you, lot, because they know black people love the music, they love to dance, they love to sing, and drums and all of them things there. So this is kind of like, it seems like in a way they kind of just gave them what would keep them busy and happy, But what they didn't really realize is that while they were doing this, these Yorubas and these people, they were also doing their rituals while dancing and singing. Records from the late 14th century refer to the dances and celebrations of African slaves in Seville, Spain, which continued as African captives arrived in the Americas. So basically, this happened years before that, it was in the 14th century where in Seville, Spain, where they originally came from, this is what they were doing. So now they thought, okay, they used to enjoy that, so let's just give them that over here as well in Cuba, just to make them, stay and feel at home away from home. Gotta remember that while all of this was going on, there were also Yoruba Jews descendants that were amongst these Yorubas, and this is what they were doing in Brazil and Cuba. You get it? So whatever was happening in Yoruba land, they ended up taking it with them over in Brazil and Cuba under merging with the Roman Catholic, merging with the Catholic Church religion, and still keeping their Yoruba traditions. They merged the two along with others, and then it ended up being called Santeria, So in a way, they still lost their way, these Yoruba Jews. Now, in Leviticus 18:3-4, God reminds Moses to tell the Israelites to not do what they used to do in Egypt, and not to be like the people of Canaan, where he is bringing them. See, here God understands that there are people in this world who worship many other gods, and he's basically saying, only focus on serving me no matter where you are, even if I'm the one who has led you somewhere new. Don't lose yourself. You might be there now as part of me blessing you, or for whatever reason, but you just got to stay focused and obedient to me. So just by reading that scripture, when you have a look at it, you'll see that it can also relate to the Yoruba Jews, because they got brought from, because of the Spanish expulsion, they moved from one place to another. They ended up in Yoruba land, and then they went over to Brazil and Cuba, but they ended up merging with their surroundings, with the natives, and then they started doing these practices and things like that. And those are the sort of things that they got warned about, that God warned us about, is to not do what the other nations are doing. Do you get what I'm saying? No matter where he brings you. And this can also relate to us as well. Like, you might just get a promotion, for example, at your workplace, and it now might mean that you're rubbing shoulders with people who, in a way might seem more important now. Do you get it? You're up there with the elites in a way, and it's just like, just because you're in these positions doesn't mean you have to now start living the way they're living, start conducting yourself the way they conduct themselves. Do you get what I'm saying? You don't forget who your God is and where you came from and things like that. So that's just what I wanted to share in this video, this part of the video, just to have a breakdown of the sort of things that these people, that these Jews were around, the sort of practices that they were doing, and how they let themselves go by also following in these wicked ways, in God's eyes. So that's just something that we've got to remember, and I hope this video's been informative, and it's enlightened you in a way. And just don't forget who your God is. And I'll see you lot on the next video. Make sure you press the like button and subscribe as well. And I'll see you lot on the next video. God bless you.